How you doing?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
I hope you have a good day.
Hope you have a better week.
I hope your month is full of successful days and a lot of great ventures. I hope you just come up, brother.
I hope your whole fucking year is spectacular.
Oh, you hope my year is spectacular?
Yeah.
You got something you want to say to me?
You got something you want to say?
For the next episode of One Gotta Stay's One Geek Tournament. For this one, we're going back to where it all started, to boldly go to the other side of the galaxy. But really, I've been doing this so long, sometimes I feel sad for my panelists. I'm worried they're going to yell at me as if I'm asking them to do something they're not trained to do.
I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. Not a mechanic, not an engineer.
Damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a torpedo technician.
But when they get on, their attitudes completely change. They no longer believe in no-win scenarios. The camera hits, and they're giving it all they got. They want to make it so their picks live long and prosper enough to make it straight on till the end of this tournament. So when before they were yelling at me, now if their picks go through, they're seeing nothing but blue skies. And with that, if you think you know what the list is for next week, comment below again. What up, family? It's your boy Amadou, and we are back with another episode, the next round in One Gotta Stay's One Geek Tournament. We're getting pretty deep into this. We're heading back to the galaxies where we are going one by one, picking the best geek characters. There are last week, we went through Wizarding World, and out of the 6 characters, Hermione and Hagrid were the ones to move on to the second round. And today, as I mentioned, we are going back to the Galaxies bracket, but instead of some wars, we're going through some Treks and some of our favorite characters from Star Trek, though some of the panel today may disagree with that, but we'll see. But between Bones, Spock, Kirk, Data, Picard, and Scotty, we are going to choose which one of them are going to stay and figure out which 2 are moving on. Speaking of our panel, I'm going to start over here with my man. You might hear a lot from him a little later on. You might see me on a show of his a little later on tonight.
Yeah.
Mr. Matt Thomas.
How you doing, Rue? How you doing, Rue? How you doing, Rue?
How are you doing?
Besides this list, I'm fine. I'm besides this list. You're missing 2 of the greatest characters in the entire series on this list. And might I add, lack of color on this list.
Oh,
lack
yes.
of color. I'm sorry, but Rue, I gotta ask. What? Hold on.
Hey, yo, where my niggas at?
I don't know. Actually, I do know. We put a poll up, and this is what the people decided.
Yo,
what
you
people
mentioned
eventually
arguably
voted, I
the
can't
best
tell you.
captain, arguably the best captain and the best security officer in the fucking franchise. That's all I gotta say.
I don't think that's an argument. I think that's straightforward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is why I appreciate you, Bibbs.
Yeah, there's one person on here who could be gone, and that captain should be on here.
Yeah.
Hey, starting off hot. I love it. We're going to move over to an alumni of the Bitesize Breakdown crew, Mr. James. James, how are you feeling? I've been in many virtual chats with you. First time actually like seeing and hearing the voice and the person. So I'm glad to be on here with you. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, it's really strange. It's like 2 years of just virtual chat, and now I'm finally seeing your face. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, love it. All right, good. And below him, it is critic extraordinaire, a beast of a man in trivia, a beast of a man in everything. Mr. William the Beast Bibiani, thank you for being on, sir. How you feeling tonight? How do you feel about this list?
Well, the list is what it is. There's a distinct lack of Cisco. There's a distinct lack of Garrick. There's a lot of people who I would put on this list instead of some folks we got on it, but it wasn't up to me. I will simply go through the process of correcting this list.
Yes.
To the best of my abilities, given the parameters we have. I would like to apologize. I wasn't able to wear. I really only have one piece of Star Trek apparel. It is a fabulous Niners baseball hoodie. However, yeah, it is. I'm in Southern California, and it's very hot. Couldn't do it. Sorry about that. But I am stoked. It's a rare opportunity to talk about Star Trek with someone besides my Star Trek podcast co-host. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Glad to do it. And last but certainly not least, the sweetest of them all, the pimp, because I have to call her the pimp. It's Miss Clee Wiggins, my fellow swag superstar on the Schmodown. How are you, Miss the Pimp?
I'm great. You can't see, I'm just wearing a Star Trek t-shirt that just says Trekspert. So, because that's what I be.
Nice. I'm sorry.
Loving it.
Yes.
We did have a 6 panelist today, Mr. PJ Campbell, but he is not feeling very well. He had to drop. So he did say he was going to be yelling at us from the couch, from his bed. However, I will be putting forth his choices and where we're going from that. But you know what? Let's get this started with my number 4. I'm going to start it off this one, and I will admit that compared to the other people on this panel, I may not be as versed in Star Trek, but I have opinions. And for me, my number 4, it wasn't easy because, like, I didn't know whether I was going to put him 4 or 5, but it was easy to put him on this spot, even though I love him to death. It's Scotty. Scotty had to be my number 4. I do think he's a very entertaining character. He always comes through in the movies. He's really hilarious. But you know what? I don't think he has as much depth as some of the other characters that I have a little bit higher than him. I'm kind of interested in more of the other one's stories and what they're doing, where Scotty can sometimes get a little bit pigeonholed in his accent, a little pigeonholed in his job. I feel like he is just all right. Just all right. Even though I love both Mr. Duhan and Mr. Pegg in the role. But with that, does anybody else have Scotty as their number 4?
Yeah, I got him.
James also has Scotty as number 4. James, why do you have Scotty at your number 4?
Well, you know, I knew he was going to be in the top 4. I love him. He's a terrific character. And, you know, Jimmy Doohan's life story is being a World War II vet is incredible. The problem is Scotty just never had a character arc. Nothing even close to the characters above him on my list today. And as entertaining as he is and as tear-jerking an episode he got in Next Generation, it's just still not enough for me. I just wanted more from his character, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like anybody's too upset to have this.
I'm not upset about it. I actually think he's
not
a little
upset.
high.
Yeah, I agree with Bibbs on this. He's a little bit too.
He was always gonna fall. Like, he wasn't gonna ever be my number 6, but he wasn't ever gonna be my number 1. So this is fine.
Here's the thing about Scotty. Scotty is the thing that defines Scotty more than anything else, and I think more than anyone else on this list. He's really good at his job. If you want an engineering, someone in charge of engineering on classic era Trek, you want Scotty. There is no better engineer we've ever encountered in Trek. He's fantastic.
Yeah,
but when it comes in a pinch, he's who you want. But when it comes to his character, he's got 2 levels. One, hilarious stereotype drunk. That's what he's from Scotland, and he's a drunk. That's the only 2 things they knew about him. And the other thing is, if you watch the original series, whenever he's in charge, because he's like 3rd in command in the original Enterprise, whenever he's in charge, whenever he's in a position to give his opinion on anything, his first thought is always, well, I guess we got to go to war with the Romulans. And they're like, no, Scotty. No, Scotty. That's the last thing we want.
Like the Worf role in that. Yeah. He's like, I think we should fire weapons captain. And you're like, let's everybody settle down first.
Like, there's a reason you're in engineering, Scotty. Stay back there. It's not great.
Yeah.
So, he's not number 1 material.
I do have to thank Scotty for giving us like one of the most memorable lines in Star Trek, if not maybe all of science fiction. I cannot change the laws of physics, Captain.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I
love it so much.
I see that referenced everywhere. It's on T-shirts.
Yeah.
It's on mugs. Yeah, it's great.
I love the character.
So thank
he's
you, Scotty.
fun. He's not a great
fun character. He's probably not even cracking my top 10 if I'm being honest. But again, I had to stick to this list. So
Yeah, sticking to this list.
Keep
sticking to this list, like, yeah, he's fine.
Keep telling our fans that they were wrong, because like if they were wrong,
the fans are way wrong.
Dead wrong.
They're dead wrong.
Like,
So
They
wrong.
watched Deep Space Nine. Did they?
Did they
to
just
my
ignore
mind,
Deep
there's
Space
only 2
Nine?
people on this list who even belong here. Everybody else can F off.
I give it 3.
I'd argue 3 or 4, but
Maybe 3, but
yeah.
Well, Cleve, since you believe that there's only 2 people who belong on this list, I don't know whether I guess it's not your number 4. Who is your number 4?
I don't know if this is going to be controversial or not. I don't know if it's going to be a hot take or not, but it's Picard.
Hey,
Mine too.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
3 people who really
High five. High five, you guys.
I'm kind of on the fence about that one, but you know, it's
Where's the guy in a Picard onesie right now? Yeah,
I can understand. I can understand a bit.
It's not a Picard onesie. It's a captain's onesie. Okay. Any captain would be wearing that.
Why is Picard your number 4? And my mama's not happy right now. She's not happy at all. Not at all.
Look, my mama probably wouldn't be happy either. It's the only white man she's ever thought was attractive.
I told my dad. I told my dad the list, and he's like, "I'm glad you're calling out the lack of black actors on there." And I agree with the list.
Yep.
And he's the one who turned me onto Trek back when Star Trek was, excuse me, not Star Trek. Star Wars was defunct after 2005. I turned to Trek. Like, that's when I was like, I need something science fiction to turn to. He's like, well, you made fun of me all these years. Check this out. And I got hooked, and I binge watched.
Yeah, my mom and her sisters are the one who turned me on to Star Trek, because when TNG premiered, I mean, my cousins and I were all little kids, but that didn't stop them from turning us into little slaves to serve them coffee and cake while they watched TNG. So, and we had to be at their beck and call, so we just sat at the couch, and that's how I got hooked on Star Trek.
But Clee, why is Picard your number 4? Again,
well, after having, especially
I
after having watched,
had to do the race.
after having watched season 2, that's too much trauma and shit to unpack.
Yeah. Okay, so you plugging in season 2 also. Cool.
Girl,
this
that
boy
boy found his mama hanging in the atrium. Oh no! Plus, he's not even really a Frenchman.
No.
His family is from England.
The worst. He's French for one season. For one season, he's French. Remember when in the first season they threw in like something bad happened and Picard went merde, but with like the most British accent. I was like merde. Like
he called his mom maman. But
no.
You know, like the Picards were in England for how many centuries until they went back to France in like the 2100s or whatever, and got their manner back, but it wasn't like the fuck. Like, I'm sorry, that's my one, I guess. But I'm like, so who owned it all these years? What was going on there? I don't have any.
A lot going on there.
Maybe another member of the family had it. Who knows? Just like
I want to see like a Picard manor, like a Downton Abbey.
Yeah,
kind of show. That's just them trying to get the
now. If we got a
paycheck.
Downton Abbey about Picard's ancestors, I would be here for it. No.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But it's and just as like if we're gonna go off this list and one's got to go, like he's my number. Like I don't want him to go, but if he's got to go, there's other people on this list who are more deserving.
Look, here's my thing about Picard. Picard is one of the better captains we've ever had.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
If you want,
he's probably like my number 2 or 3 captain.
Yeah, that's
like if you told me like, hey, you're assigned to a Starfleet vessel and your captain is Picard, I would be like, awesome. This is a really good deal. What a great captain. I love him to pieces. What makes him a great captain is actually not necessarily what makes him a good character, which is he's so diplomatic and egalitarian. He represents this kind of ideal of like what Starfleet is supposed to be, which is, and I love Next Generation to death, and I'm going to use this word with all the love in my heart. Boring. It's a workplace drama. The original, the Next Generation.
Comparatively,
it's about how everything's cool. It's about how like we run into uncool stuff, but we're always cool when we deal with it. We don't actually have a lot of interpersonal drama or character arcs, which is why the only characters who usually get like really memorable storylines in Next Generation are Data and Worf, because they have these like really strong, unusual drives.
Yeah, and they're outsiders.
They're outsiders.
And they're from outside the Federation, outside humanity.
So Picard is one of two things. He's either super cool, or every once in a while, when the plot demands it, cough, first contact, driven by vengeance. Just every once in a while, driven by vengeance. Like, and it's just wait, are we ever, is that consistent with anything? Literally nothing, but we're going to do it anyway.
It's not until Picard the show that we see that, and then we know that he's also driven by like huge amounts of trauma.
The trauma is real with him.
Oh yeah. He's been through a lot. To be fair, Picard has been through a lot, but he always like shrugged it off. Like that one episode, what's that one episode everyone likes but me, where he has to live out an entire alien
I hate that episode, and everybody loves it. Inner Light.
So Inner Light, his mind is like infected by an alien space tech, and he is forced to live out an entire lifetime on another planet. And what does he do? Next day, go to work. You lived 60 years.
Yes.
Off of a starship, forgetting everything you ever knew, and then you're just at work the next day.
Like O'Brien had more trauma off of being in prison for 20 years.
I was just going to say that. The O'Brien prison episode. Exactly.
Much better version of that story. I agree with a million%. O'Brien should be on this list.
So
Matt, you also had Picard
at
number 4. Matt, you also had Picard at number 4. Why do you have at number 4?
So actually, William touched on a lot of my points. He's a great captain. He's just boring as all hell. And that's why I think, as much as I do enjoy TNG, for the most part, before I watch a TNG episode, I'll go watch one of their movies because I get a more interesting Picard and a good amount of them. First Contact is honestly my favorite Star Trek movie, so that's what I'll turn to first and foremost. But these two hit on a lot of my points. He's very diplomatic. He can be boring. Worf was my favorite character on The Next Generation. And there's a reason the most popular character on that show got brought onto another show to help bring its ratings up and make it survive longer. Just saying. So with that, they touched on all of it. I'm not even going to try to fight it.
All right. Yeah. Well, then we're going to keep moving. Go ahead, Khalid.
I'm just going to say
he's basic.
He's basic.
Basic pick. Might make me cry a little bit, but that's fine. We were gonna go to PJ's number 4. Hi, PJ. Thing is, PJ's number 4 is also Bibbs' number 3. So before we get to a break, we'll go to Bibbs' number 3. Usually we break at the 4s, but because we have to do this little swerve, Bibbs, who is your 3? Why do you think PJ has him as number 4? We don't know why, but your number 3, PJ's number 4. Present your case.
All right, my number 3 is a character. Most of the characters on this list are people that most Star Trek fans love. So we're always killing our darlings. But my number 3 is a character who I think is actually arguably a slightly better, or at least more interesting captain than Picard. But I just couldn't bring myself to put Captain Kirk in my top 2. Now, I like Captain Kirk a lot, and one of the things I like about Captain Kirk gets a lot of crap. Captain Kirk is a character who has, I think, in the eyes of a lot of people, been defined by parodies of him a lot more than the actual character himself. A lot of people associate him with Shatner's particular brand of overacting, which he only pulled out when the script required it. All right, when the script demanded it, he did it, but most of the time he's giving a pretty soulful, good performance the entire way through. He is often considered this sort of brash, gung-ho cowboy type. He's not actually. He's actually very reasonable, and most of the great classic Star Trek episodes end with Kirk thinking his way out of a problem, using the people around him to help guide his decisions. That's really, really excellent. The only reason Kirk is my number 3 is because of my number 2, I think, are more representative of what Star Trek is really about. Kirk is, in many respects, this old-fashioned pulp captain. He's handsome. He's sexy. He's sexual. He is confident. He is the pinnacle of, I'm just going to say it, this sort of white hero colonialist action type, this Alan Quatermain vestige of, frankly, a bygone era of adventure storytelling that we've long since needed to move on from. He's a very good version of that, and he's actually like a character we can all rally behind and appreciate as a hero, especially the original version. Not a huge fan of the Chris Pine version. I think the biggest problem with the Chris Pine version is that by changing his childhood, they took away that part of his childhood where he escaped that genocide that was perpetrated by that one Shakespearean actor in the original series, and I think that made his character a lot less interesting and thoughtful in the Abrams verse. And I think that hurts the overall comparison too. But yeah, I love Kirk. Kirk is a great character. I love following Kirk's adventures, but he's just not my 1 and 2.
Did anybody have Kirk either at 4 or 5?
I have him at number 5.
Oh, I said that. I meant 4 or 3, but you know what? You had him at 5. Clee, why do you have him at 5? Why do you have him worse?
Oh, because he's
nobody else give it away. That's my fault. I shouldn't have said that. But go ahead and do it anyway. Why do you have?
Oh, because he is emblematic of colonizer white man hot-headed averageness, and I'm not here for it. Like, he's not the character that he is stereotyped as. That's 100% true. He's not a womanizer. He's not. He doesn't go into things sort of gung-ho, but he is a bit of a hothead in my opinion. But he does, for the most part, like, he's like, all of his romantic encounters are consensual for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. I can think of maybe 4 off the top of my head, but of the like 3 dozen that happened over the course of the 3 years, that's not bad. Especially considering it was made in the 60s. So I think he's just he's boring, and the only reason why he's not my number 6 is because I feel like my number 6 is worse.
We will figure out who your number 6 is fairly soon.
I think it's my number 6 too. I will get anything. It's my number 6.
We'll figure that out. But for those of you who are just getting on, a little recap. So as I mentioned, PJ is sick, so he isn't able to be on, but we're going through his picks. For number 4 is me and James got rid of Scotty. Clee, Bibbs, and Matt have been waxing poetic about how Picard is number 4 for sure. And PJ also has Kirk at number 4, while Bibbs has Kirk at number 3. So we're going to keep it moving, and we're going to move on over to James. James, who do you have as your number 3?
I have Picard as my number 3.
Okay.
So
we're just splitting hairs at that point.
Hear me out. Okay, so TNG was the show that got me into Star Trek. Like, I watched the original series with my dad a bit, but Star Trek didn't really click for me until I watched The Next Generation, and from there I was just like binge watching it all the time. Picard might have ended up lower down on this list, on my list at least, if it weren't for the Picard series, which gave us a much needed backstory for him. Now, say what you want about, I know a lot of people have some very strong feelings about that show. I enjoy it. I know it's not, I don't think it's the best.
Oh, I love that show.
I enjoyed the show.
I love the show.
I think that's what the show's what drove him further down my list on it.
Yeah. The show's what made it be like, you're not as stable as I thought.
Okay, so I rate so I don't want to get into too much about how I rated the characters, but I will say that the characters rated higher on my list have better character arcs, have character arcs period, as opposed to the ones lower on my list. So Picard, yes, he got a character arc now. He's got some backstory, and of course Patrick Stewart's just absolutely phenomenal Shakespearean actor. So yeah, seeing his range in Picard and seeing his backstory is really what got him on the number 3 for my list.
Well, PJ also agreed with you. PJ also has Picard as number 3, which is hurting me and my mom's soul, but it's fine. Fine. Please.
Rue, I gotta get you Paramount Plus, bro.
I have
then we need to educate you then.
I need a little bit of education. Clee, educate us some more. Who do you have as your number 3?
Okay, my number 3 and my number 2, I went back and forth on a couple of in my mind. Like obviously, I got you my list pretty quickly, but trust me, I thought about it for about as long as Data considered becoming a Borg. But so my number
that was
3,
an eternity for Data.
Yeah.
yeah. So my number 3 is Data.
Oh, poor Data.
Why do you have Data as your number 3?
Well, I just think he seems like he has an arc, and in a lot of ways he does, but in a lot of ways he's the most boring character on TNG. Like he has the same issue week after week after week, and it's not until the movie. And it's not until the movies that we even get any real movement on that, and even that's still like based in technology and not on any sort of growth from him having learned through his AI or whatever the hell his positronic brain, moving him forward. He's all just, and it's sort of like it's the same motivation week after week, and like it's good for a storytelling, but once you're used to the character, then you're just like, and he fucks Yar in the first season.
Second episode. Yeah.
So I'm like,
I had questions. I no longer have questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and I love Data. I have a joke about him in my stand-up act, but
I like Data more than you do.
I think I do too.
I was born. I just like it, as a character overall. When I thought about it, I think he's boring, and I think there's a character that I personally find more interesting, and he was almost my number 1. There's the other character who's my number 2.
I love Data, and I think I love Data for one of the reasons why you don't like Data. You talked about how he's kind of boring. He's got the same storyline every single week, and you say that's not character development, and you're right, it's not. It's just who he is.
Yeah,
that's something that I kind of like about Data, and that's something that I think
it's comforting, and it's something I would like in my personal life, but I don't need to watch it every week.
I find it a little tragic to me, and this is one of the reasons why Data I don't maybe think necessarily is the best Star Trek character ever, but I think he's maybe a little better than this is. I think Data doesn't understand how great Data is. He's always trying to change. He's always trying to understand how other people are. And he's never really just fully accepting no, this is who I am. And that curiosity that pushes him forward, it's like the only emotion that he's got, is the tragedy for me is that he's always trying to be someone else, and he's never fully accepting of who he is. And I find that something that you can return to in an episodic structure in almost any context, and you can get something really interesting out of it. I do agree that it wears thin after a while. It's like if you're watching like Third Rock from the Sun. By season 7, surely they've got most of humanity figured out. Like they're not going to get too many plays on words mixed up.
Yeah, like if children can do it, why can't you guys?
Right. So I'm with you after a while, and I do think that the thing that sucks is that he wanted those emotions for so long, and how does he get them? The movie just decided he should have them now because whatever. Like he doesn't have to earn them or anything.
He steals them from his dead brother.
Just takes them. He just takes them and they throw them in there as a gag because nothing's happening for most of the
because it just makes his character more interesting and it gets him to say the S word.
But then we don't get a chance to really explore that in any of the movies the way we could have in the show if you had given it to him like season 5. So I think that's
I think it's not even really brought up that much again until First Contact when Picard tells him to turn it off.
He can turn it off now.
Yeah.
I
think I'll turn off my emotion chip. Oh, really? After all those years of fighting for it, you want to turn it off now?
But you spent 7 years fighting for it, and then in year 9, you're just like, I'm going to turn it off.
No, that sucks. I give you that.
Yeah. If you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I probably would have rated Data lower, but going through and binge watching all of TNG beginning to end. Yes, even season 1, I did it. Data's got these blink and you'll miss it moments, like single shots or like even less than a second in a handful of episodes that are just brilliant. It might be like an expression on his face when he finds out his best friend Geordi's been abducted, or when in the finale of TNG, there's this. He gives this great look to O'Brien after Picard's speech about how this is the best ship in the fleet, and it's just these little. Brent Spiner just gives us the little moments that show how far Data has come throughout the series.
But I think that's more down to performance than like
character itself.
Writing or the character, and like that's Brent Spiner being like, I'm gonna do this thing and I get away with it.
The other thing I do want to just throw out there, and I think I really love about Data is, and this is kind of an accident that they said that this happened, but I think it is relevant. He came to Data became part of Star Trek's overall representation because a lot of people who are on the spectrum connected with Data. And I think that's something that was not something that we had truly seen. I mean, Spock, some people said the same thing about Spock, but I think Data even more so. And I think some credit deserves for that. I think that's a character type we hadn't properly.
Oh, that's a great that's a great bit of headcanon. Like I like to say like Adira sort of represents that in Discovery. Sure. And other shows like ROM represents that sort of to some degree on DS9. Like there are other characters who've done that, and Data is very much that for a lot of people. Like in a lot of the Star Trek fan groups I'm in on Facebook, that's something that people always say, and I think that I agree with that. I mean, I'm not on the spectrum as far as I know. Could be, who knows? But I think it's a great, it's a great bit of headcanon for people, and then I think that the writers going forward in these new shows intentionally bringing in characters like that, because I think Adira is meant to intentionally represent that
exploration into a little bit more of emotion or not having emotion is why I had Data higher than I have Scotty. But again, you can kind of only go so far. So I also have Data at number 3 for a lot of the reasons y'all said, in terms of like just being able to quickly just turn it off. And I don't think he, as much as it's a good look into what that's like, and again, I really like to point out somewhat representing or possibly representing people on the spectrum. My other characters are just a little bit more complicated, a little bit more like I really love delving deep into them. So I also have Data at 3. Does anybody else have Data at number 3? No. So we're gonna head over to Matt. He has a little caveat with this, but the caveat is going to have to come after he explains why he put his number 3 at number 3.
Initially, I did have Spock there, but recency has played it in a factor because I have seen the first 5 episodes of Strange New Worlds. So I was just like, oh, snap, I meant to switch that around.
But it's too late. He put Spock at number 3.
I know. That's why I was like, wait, I meant to switch these. No, but it's too late. But no. I do want to say Spock is one of the few people who can say that has been played impeccably through no matter what actor is playing him, whether it is Ethan Peck, whether it is Leonard Nimoy, whether it is why am I forgetting homie from
Zachary Quinto.
Zachary Quinto.
Thank you. But his emotional journey throughout the show is part of the show and movies is why I love the character so much. When we talked earlier about characters I would put in our Star Trek pantheon outside of Cisco, Spock is honestly right there. It's just one of those things where I wish I changed my list in time because it'd be easier to explain why. But no, Spock is someone who is able to point out the most illogical and question some things that we find logical, but others may not. And I've always enjoyed that about the character. And he's super intelligent. He's a badass in my eyes, and I've always loved that.
All I'm going to say about this is I want to kick this conversation down the curb because he's not my number 3, not even close to my number 3. So I feel like we're going to be having a longer Spock conversation later unless someone else picked him at this point.
We will see whether or not
we're going to see where
that means excited to find out lower or we're going higher. We'll figure that out. But a quick recap before we get into that. We all have 4 left. So I still have Spock, Kirk, Picard, and Bones, while Klee has Scotty, Spock, Kirk, and Bones. Bibbs is left with Scotty, Spock, Bones, and Data. James has Spock, Kirk, Bones, and Data. PJ has gotten rid of Kirk and Picard, and Matt has gotten rid of, even though he didn't want to, got rid of Spock and Picard. Kind of, sort of. But what we're going to do now, before we get into our top two and our number ones, we're going to go quickly through our bottom twos and see who really, really got kicked to the curb. For me, it was pretty easy. Bones and Kirk are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bones and Kirk are gone. Like Kirk was easily my one all the way at the end. Bones and Scotty were going back and forth for 4 and 5 only because I actually really love the two of them. I think they're hilarious. I love their one-liners. I love just all the shit they give everybody else. But I knew right away Kirk could just get out of here. I like he's not a bad character, but you know what? I don't care for him much. Clee. Mm-hmm. Clee also did the same thing. She just flipped it.
Yeah, Bones was the first one. I was like, you're number 6.
Yeah.
Bye, racist.
Yeah. Bibbs has Scotty and also believes Bone is the worst.
Yeah, the person who like I'm amazed that when we were picking the greatest Star Trek characters ever, we ended up picking the old racist we have for no reason, who is like be fired in any HR department today, let alone in the future.
And I've heard like a lot of people say, well, he was joking with him. Well, you know,
no,
it's not a joke.
That's not goddamn funny is what the stuff he says to Spock, especially in the show. Especially in the show.
Yeah, it's not so much in the movies, but in the show, he is a racist.
He's horrible, and he's racist to other species too. He's punching pregnant women on that show. Like he's not a good person. He's the antithesis of what Trek is all about. And I appreciate you kind of want to have a counterpoint to what Trek is all about, but you fire him quickly to prove that point. He's terrible. Dr. Mbenge was right there. He's a very good doctor. Fire Bones.
Oh, yes. James tends to agree. Also has Bones at 5 and 6. James, anything you want to add to that excellent soliloquy?
I really don't have much to add. I mean, it was really a coin toss between which one got the 5th and the 6th place. Neither of them grabbed me as characters so much. Kirk in the movies is fine. I mean, Wrath of Khan is fine, but like beyond that, there's nothing to rate them any higher. Just
PJ also thought Bones was a piece of shit.
Bones
doesn't like Scotty. And Matt has Data as number 6.
Whoa!
And doesn't like Scotty that much either. Matt, any words?
I'm gonna have to.
Wow.
We talked about boring characters, so like, the most interesting I ever find Data is in First Contact, and other than that, I could care less about him. So there's that.
I like when he bangs Yar. I think I love that.
I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched
Next
Generation in so long. I was just like, granted, out here, middle school and high school is when I watched Next Generation. So I haven't. I'm 27 now. I haven't touched that in almost a decade. I tend to watch the movies and Deep Space Nine. And the new shows. So a lot of my opinions are based off of what I see in those. And Data isn't that interesting of a character to me. And Scotty.
I did a big rewatch of all of the original shows during the first parts of the pandemic. So like the first year of the pandemic, I watched the whole show in order by star date.
Nice.
All the way through Enterprise by year, but star date it would be
love you, PJ.
All right.
To be fair, I'm a college student, so I don't have that kind of time.
Also, to be fair,
so I did nothing but cook and watch Star Trek.
Trek has a pretty long history, going back at least to the animated series, of being anti-burning people at the stake. Even the devil. They were going to burn the devil at the stake, and Kirk was like, "Nah, we don't do that."
Picard put the devil like in jail, basically. Although she wasn't really the devil, but still.
We're going to get into our number ones, but real quick, if you haven't already, please go visit us at bitesizebreakdown.com. We do reviews in 100 words or less, a lot of different top fives. We also, again, have this channel. So please subscribe, leave your comments on what you think below, and please support us.
Nick, don't tell me Worth got 7th in the poll, because he would have been in my top 3, maybe top 2 so easily.
Yeah, probably mine too.
That's just like
Worth was 7th.
At that point, I would have been like, let's pick one of the old white guys out the poll and put in the black actor. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying. I could have
affirmative action was necessary.
I could have vetoed and just said F it, but I did it. But justice for Worf, justice for Cisco. Hey. But going into it, our number ones. We've talked about everybody as much, so if you want to talk your ones and twos, but our number ones break down like this. 4 of us kept Spock, 1 of us kept Kirk, and all know what I did. If I didn't pick Picard, my mama would have killed me. So 1, I'm a mama's boy. I had to pick Picard. But second, again, I'm not as versed as everybody else, but I actually genuinely love Picard. I think he is a badass. I think he is just no nonsense. You know what? You ain't stepping to me at all. I love that character to death when it comes to that. Spock was very, 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 very close.
He's arguably the 2nd or 3rd best captain out of all the captains.
He's a really good character. Once we get to like number 4, we're at the point where I'm like, yeah, there are other characters I might like more, but these are all good characters. Yeah, I love Picard. Yeah. Picard is great.
If we're just going on captains, he's number 2 or 3.
2 or 3, without a doubt. Pacific number 1. Period.
Because
it's a toss-up for Cisco and Janeway for me.
I replaced his name at Spock. Spock is PJ. But Clee, Bibbs, and James and PJ kept Spock. And Matt is the only sole Kirk lover here. With that,
again,
ladies and gentlemen.
I explained my logic.
Kirk, that colonizer.
I explained my logic a little bit before when I talked about how I view Trek. I should say all the J.J. Abrams films, for the most part, have become comfort films to me. And how Chris Pines portrays Kirk.
I like Chris Pines' Kirk.
And in my mind, that's
a different Kirk, but I like him.
Yeah, that's what catapults Kirk to number 1. That's the Kirk
I disagree sort of a little bit with Bibbs about Chris Pines, like the story of it and the interpretation of Chris Pine having done it. Like, I like that he's still a little bit quintessentially Kirk. He has all of those sort of character traits, but it's tweaked. I mean, it's 25% different because that's what they had to do. But
he thinks more, and he's more analytical about certain things he thinks about, and that's why I love Chris Pine's Kirk. And like I said, when I came up with this, I couldn't I don't care about Shatner. I'm gonna be honest, but I couldn't get Chris Pine's Kirk out of my head. Period. When I was making this list, so I was like, you know what? Besides having an affinity for the costumes of the OG series, I love.
Yeah, and like my favorite Star Trek movie is The Undiscovered Country. Out of the
same,
yes.
Thank you. Preach. All right, and I like Kirk in that movie. That's probably besides Wrath of Khan, that's the best Kirk on screen in my opinion. Even though with Chris Pine, I love Star Trek 09. That's probably my 3rd or 4th favorite Star Trek film overall.
I think there's a couple of underrated Kirk episodes of the original series. There's a really good one called Obsession, where he runs into this monster that killed everyone on his previous ship, and it's making him second guess everything because he's completely re-traumatized. And that's a really good bit of acting from Kirk there, and we get to see him really be tested as a captain and have to overcome his frailties in a way he usually does. And there's a couple of good Kirk episodes.
I like the one where he's split and there's a good sort of a good Kirk and a bad Kirk. That actually shows that Shatner has more range than a lot of people gave him credit for on that show. But that's also the episode where I think a lot of people take the stereotype of Shatner's acting from, because his angry sort of crazy Shatner in that episode is a little over the top, but his thoughtful, more sensitive Kirk is great. It's great, it really shows that Shatner does have some range.
So, the panel, when this is probably the quickest I've gotten list from a panel ever, because how bad
very strong opinions here.
This list did not go.
You are missing the quintessential characters.
So if you see a bite-sized poll on Facebook, if you see me posted on Twitter, head over, make sure y'all vote and go that, or just keep doing what you're doing. Vote more and see if it plays out that way. So just my panel can complain even more because it's always fun to hear that. James, Clee, Bibbs, why did you all pick Spock over everybody, over all the other characters?
Here's what I'm going to say about Spock. I think Spock and Data occupy a similar position on their respective shows. They're the outsider. They're people who are learning about humanity. But I think there's a big difference between them. And there's one thing that puts Spock well over Data. And I alluded to it a little bit when I talked about one of the things that I find frustrating about Data is that he only wants to be human. He has no sense of himself. Spock is half human and half Vulcan, but he is intensely proud of his actual heritage. His Vulcan heritage. So when he is encountering humanity and having an outsider's perspective, because he chose to be raised more Vulcan than human, he's not doing what Data does, where he's going, "Oh, humans are so special. Everything should be human. If only I were a human." You know, a Klingon and a Betazoid too, right? Like, why don't you want to be a Betazoid? Why don't you want to be a Klingon? Why do you only want to be a human? It's so weirdly geocentric. Spock gives us that perspective while also having absolute dignity with the culture that he brings to Star Trek. With Spock, it's not about people going off into the outer reaches and only caring about what it means to be human. It's caring about finding commonalities between different people and actually becoming more multicultural. There's a great quote. It's not from Spock, but it is from a Vulcan, the greatest Vulcan, Surak. And it's my favorite Star Trek quote, which is, "I am pleased to see that we have differences. May we together become greater than the sum of both of us." And for me, Spock represents that. Spock is about actually not just trying to become more human, not just trying to learn more about humanity, but about actually trying to find a place within himself for all things, which is why one of my least favorite scenes in all of Star Trek is when Kirk is eulogizing Spock and he says, "In all of my travels, I have never encountered a soul that is more human." And you can see they cut to Kirstie Alley, like looking to someone else, like, the fuck is that racist shit? More human? He was very proud to be Vulcan. What the hell is that crap? So that pissed me off. But other than that, I think Spock actually represents the most Trek stuff. Whether or not he's the most specifically interesting character, we can debate. I happen to think he is. But I think he represents what Trek is about in a very meaningful and great way. So that's why he's my number one with a bullet. And he would be no matter who was on the list, I think.
So they got that right. Okay. Just check.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Bibbs is saying. And the other thing I would point out is that he also comes to accept his humanity in a way that wasn't shameful for him as it was when he was a child and a young man. He's a little bit ashamed to be half human, even though he loves his mom. And we all saw in 09 Star Trek,
Star Trek introduction.
His mama was everything. But he didn't accept that half of him in himself. And then over the course of the show and the movies, we see him accepting it, which is probably why. And like, I think a lot of people maybe think this subconsciously, but I've always thought this consciously. And that search for Spock and the way he's represented in that movie is not my favorite because it's the most sort of rejection of his humanity of all of the iterations of Spock across all the movies and all of the shows, including Zach Quinto's version and including Ethan Peck's version. And so far, I love Zachary Quinto's version of Spock. And I think in that movie, he accepts his humanity a little bit more, but not quite as much. But I think Ethan Peck is going to do an impeccable job. So far, he's been knocking it out of the park.
Quinto is my third favorite Spock, and I love that character. That tells you all you
James, you also had Spock. Why do you have Spock over everybody else? And if you haven't been able to talk about your number two, because like I know Clee had Scotty at number two as well, and he was almost number one. Just you feel free to.
My number two was Data, so we've already covered.
Yeah, briefly we got Data was my number two as well. But Spock at my number one, I think, and I don't think we got enough time for me to elucidate exactly why he's at number one, but some of it's already been said, but I think about the time period that Spock as a character was created in. We're talking about the 1960s, Cold War is in full swing. And we have, of course, Kirk, the colonizer leader, the captain of the Enterprise. That was a good way of putting it, by the way. I never thought of that before. But Spock is a character who speaks from logic at a time and place when, both in Star Trek and in our history, where you don't really see much of that. It's mostly there's a lot of fear in the world. There's a lot of venturousness on the bridge of the Enterprise, but he's always telling everybody to take a step back, slow down, and think about what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson also put this really well in terms of thinking about what other species might be like as we head out into the cosmos. Star Trek and Spock was really the first character who didn't just communicate with words. He has the mind meld. And the fact that Star Trek in '66 thought to ask that question, like maybe aliens are so different from us, they have a way of communicating that's just completely different, divorced from our experience. As Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it, it's like Star Trek wasn't just crawling or walking; it was often running. It was leagues ahead of the game. So,
but in some regards, I would argue that its sexism was pretty much.
Well, if we're speaking just strictly about Spock and the kinds of questions,
I'm just being fair, but
strictly about Spock. Like, it's also like the logic. It's something that resonates even today, as we see that there are a lot of people who don't use reason and logic in a lot of how they think about things. Spock has always been there as a way to be like this, like we should always take a step back and look at how things actually are, as opposed to the knee-jerk reaction, which is still a valid way of thinking about things, but you should always take a step back.
And I think
given the time.
Consistently. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was also going to say, like, when it comes to looking at Kirk as a colonizer, which he is, that's part of the tradition he's part of. Spock is not part of that, and actually. One of the frustrating things about Star Trek for me in almost all of its iterations is it's about like the whole universe, and we're exploring the whole universe, and oh my God, everyone's gonna come join Starfleet, but it's always about humanity dead center. And I get it, we come from a planet of humans, so that's kind of our default. But Spock being like kind of the runaway hit character of the original series, I think is noteworthy because it shows that we kind of need people to be critical of us. And I think Spock is in a great position to do that with a certain amount of humor, a certain amount of affection, a sort of there, you little humans kind of thing when we are not at our best, which is a lot of the time, even in the utopian ideal of Star Trek. So I think that's one thing that makes him great.
Yeah.
And just another thing to add about his character, looking at him across every Star Trek, every Trek series. I haven't seen Strange New Worlds yet. I really want to see that show.
First episode is fantastic. Just wait till you see the other 5 or the 4.
All right. So, looking at Spock's character across every iteration of Star Trek in which he appears, you have those big moments like in Undiscovered Country where the Klingon Empire is about to collapse, or or in Next Generation where the Romulans are becoming more interested in the teachings of Sirach, and most of the characters in the Trek universe have asked, okay, how can we use this to our advantage? Like, how can we make the Klingon Empire collapse faster? How can we hurt them more while they're down? But Spock, every single step of the way, he's like, let's just invite them to the table. Like somebody is hurting or somebody needs our help. Let's talk to them and see how we can cooperate to build a better future. And
exactly,
I am struggling right now to think of times when he advocated violence for any purpose, even in self-defense.
Into Darkness, Vengeance.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, it's one of the
Into Darkness is really the only ones, and that was like that was very much his human side taking over.
Didn't he a little bit in Discovery too, if I remember correctly? I'm trying to.
No, not really. Like he was very measured in Undiscovered Country because like Kirk and McCoy are in prison in like basically.
I didn't mention Discovery Country. I was saying Discovery season 2.
Oh, in Discovery season 2, that's also his humanity because he was basically had a mental break.
Yeah, and we also saw when he was there,
and he wasn't violent. Like that turned out to be basically a deep fake.
There's also there's also times when we've seen him as a little kid, either in the prologue in Star Trek 09 or in that one really amazing top tier Star Trek animated episode Yesteryear.
Yeah.
We saw him go through his rite of passage. Like, that's a different version of Spock. That's a young, adolescent, hormonal, kind of shitty
And
Spock.
even in those instances, he was driven to violence. He didn't choose violence.
Exactly. But those are the times when he did do it.
It was like in self-defense, basically.
And again, those are times, and I think it's noteworthy that how many Spock stories are there? Hundreds? Thousands by now, and there's and we can count the ones where he was violent on a thing. Like, everyone acts out of character once or twice in their lives, if only just test it out, and then you realize, oh, that is so not me. I'm never doing that again. Like, so I think those are just the outliers, and those are the exceptions that prove the rule because that's how rare it is.
Yeah, and also let's just talk about the Vulcan salute for a second. Like, how far has that infiltrated pop culture? Like, is it I think pretty much you could make this sign anywhere in North America and people would know what it means.
Well, and what's funny is that, and I think
anywhere in the world.
But I think it speaks
from everywhere.
It speaks to Nimoy's influence on the character because Nimoy came up with this, and it actually comes from his Jewish heritage. Yes. And that added more multiculturalism to a show that was more multicultural than anything else on the air at the time. It had a long way to go, but it was pretty groundbreaking in that regard, which is why I maintain that the most unforgivable episode of Star Trek ever is that one shitty Nazi episode where like, Nazis took over a planet and they actually gave Nimoy a line, which was like, well, you got to hand it to them. They're efficient. No. Everyone
that up there.
I agree with you.
That's
right
the
there,
worst.
That one is up there with TNG's second episode of the first season where they go to the Africa planet. And then it's all, God.
Yeah. Or
Jesus Christ.
Then there was the one where the same season where it's like, oh, it's a planet run by women. Oh, and it's terrible there. Thanks, Star Trek.
Oh, like we're trying to
Thanks,
make
Star
them
Trek.
seem
Good
like
job,
Amazonian.
Yeah.
Like Amazonian women, but they're all just a bunch of like Karens.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And all the men are like horse jockeys. What the hell is going on?
I don't know.
Usually by the time,
are they not feeding them milk as children? What the hell is happening?
Usually by the time I like to usually have the last word because I am not versed as these lovely people, and I'm loving hearing them wax poetic. We do got to wrap up real quickly. Any last words on Scotty? Because even though I picked Picard, Spock is.
We know you basic. It's
probably number one. It's fine. So I'll listen to y'all all day. But any last words on Scotty? You did have him as number 2.
Yeah, Scotty is my number 2, basically because as a technical writer, I really appreciate somebody who's very good at their job and a decent communicator. And as an alcoholic, I love a good drinker.
That's a great line, honestly.
Lovely.
Put that on your Twitter profile. Yeah.
So I would be there drinking and tinkering all day with Scotty. I'd be writing down everything he does so that people can do it behind him.
Drinkering.
Yeah.
We'll call it drinkering.
Drinkering. I like it.
So before we do a quick recap, I always end the show with a question to the panel. And as I'll let y'all think about it as I pull up some people's choices in the chat in the recap. If there was one character in the Star Trek universe that would shake up your list, doesn't necessarily mean they would be first, doesn't necessarily mean we'd be last, but they would make you think a little bit and make it different. What would that one character be? I'll let y'all think about it for a little bit. Who would
you already know who Matt and I would
we've already talked about a few of these, but okay. I'll come up with
Just a quick recap.
I'll try to come up with something different.
But if I can come up with a different
I'm not
one,
coming up with any. Give me Cisco, damn it!
Wait. Let Ruth have a moment.
I kept Picard because I like going to my parents' house. It's a lovely, lovely place. I get fed. Thank you, Mom. Clee, Bibbs, James, and PJ kept Spock because that was the logical and probably correct choice. I still would have picked Picard anyway. And Matt kept Kirk. A couple of people in the chat, I do have to move up. As PJ said, Spock is Spock. He's number 1. And also Leonard Nimoy. Allison does love Zachary Quinto Spock over Chris Evans perk, but Chris Pine's perk. And then she fixed it later. Don't worry. She did fix it later.
Yeah. We got you, Allison. We know you know things.
Yes. Keeping Picard and Picard and Spock. That's
the new school ship name for Kirk and Spock is Cock. So
yes, there we go. only one who really had Bones in the top 4. And then Steven also had Picard at number 1. But Spock at number 3 and Kirk at 2. And my friend also always coming in with the hot takes. Hemsworth as Kirk's father was the best part of the whole trilogy.
Oh, get that man out of here! Although that is a very good. That is
you know what? It's in retrospect that was probably brilliant cast. That casting director deserves a fucking Academy Award.
I remember
in retrospect, like because we didn't know who Chris Hemsworth was.
No, that is not. That is way more weight today than it did when it came out.
You want to know what's funny though? I remember reading the Star Trek EW leading up to that film's release, and them talking about this actor, Chris Hemsworth, keep an eye. He's only going to be in like 7-8 minutes of it, but he's going to be one of the next big things. I'm like, they're wrong about this half the time, and here we are all these years later.
Well, it's just like when TNG premiered, LeVar Burton was the biggest star on the show.
Yeah.
Like,
true.
He was he was the one who was slumming.
Nobody
knew who anybody else was. Everybody knew who LeVar Burton was because of reading Rainbow and Roots. Everybody else was like, who the frick is Jonathan Frakes? I don't
think any of them had a major credit before that. None of the people in the main
didn't
cast.
like Patrick Stewart was probably number 2 and only because of Dune.
And even that theater.
That
if you knew theater, you probably knew him. But yeah,
if you knew theater, and that was only released like maybe 9 months before TNG premiered.
Yeah.
Right,
Gates
so
McFadden had already done the choreography for Labyrinth. So there you go. That was
PJ said he loves Janeway, but Riker probably. For me, you mentioned Geordi, you did, but for me, if the person who would probably shake up the list most is Khan. I think Khan is one of the best villains. Ricardo was great, and I thought he was a really complex character who brought a lot to the role. Though again, I only saw Wrath of Khan, but I really like Khan as a villain, and he would have gave me pause. Matt, tell us why Cisco should have been on all of the lists.
Can I have Clee and Bibbs join me on this? Because I think they are the same opinion on this.
I came up with some other names.
I came up with some other names because like we all know that Cisco is who should have been on this list.
Cisco had unique challenges that only Cisco had to deal with. Cisco had to deal with consistent diplomatic relations with a very complicated several species. And he handled it better than anyone else could.
Most notably the Cardassians. Like I don't think any other captain that we know of. I don't think any of the other captains could have done what he did with the Cardassians. And managed the Bajorans in the same way. Well, I don't think he would have had the compassion for the Bajorans and the absolutely way to tell Dukat to F off every day.
Only
the way that he did. Janeway and Picard and Kirk could not have done that.
To the best of my knowledge, because I haven't seen the new Picard
maybe
season
Janeway,
yet.
Maybe. But
to the best of my knowledge, Cisco is the only person in all of Star Trek to punch out Q.
Yes.
So I think you get bonus points for that alone.
Everybody else entertains him.
Cisco for me, he takes it because of his monologue about being a saint in paradise. He says,
"Oh, is that from not in the Pale Moonlight, but what's the one?"
No, that's from way before. I think when they're dealing with the Maquis.
Okay.
Yeah. It goes something. It goes something. He's just gotten off a call from with Starfleet Command, and then I think Bashir walks in. And before Bashir can open his mouth, Cisco's like, you know what the problem with Starfleet Command is? They live in paradise. Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise. Out here, the problems haven't been solved yet. So I think that just kind of sums up not only his character, but what Deep Space Nine was trying to talk about. It's like, how do you be the ideal that Star Trek presents?
Extrapolate that idea of if you're in Federation and especially central to the Federation, you live in paradise. But if you're on the outer edges of the Federation, even if you're in the Federation, it's not necessarily paradise yet.
So
Matt, anything you want to add before I go into Bibbs?
The present Black Father. One of the first things I sent you when I was first bitching about Cisco not being on this list is something that's always been important to me is he was always the present Black Father. He always made time for his son, especially since he was a widower.
Yeah.
And he didn't let his job get in the way.
Yeah. He always knew what Jake was up to.
Yeah.
He just let Jake,
he actually balanced it.
He balanced the Federation life along with his personal life. And he's just emotionally one of the strongest characters to me because there are so many moments within Deep Space Nine where you're just like, damn, that's a hell of a performance. And it's just, that's why it's my favorite series. It's one series I continually go back to. And yeah, so
he didn't just balance it with the Starfleet life. He balanced it with a galactic war going on.
Oh yeah.
And with another unprecedented villain in the Changelings.
Yeah.
Who were very much like, in a lot of ways, like the Borg. They had a single mind about things. They had a single way of approaching things. And so you had to defeat this one thing, but because they were so unified, they were more unified than the Federation, just like the Borg were. It was like he had to mobilize his station and the Federation near him in order to defeat the Changelings, in the same way that TNG and Voyager had to deal with the Borg. So, but probably who would have shaken up my list would probably, if I hadn't picked Sisko, would be Janeway or Uhura.
And Bibbs, what about you?
There's a bunch of people who probably would have shaken up my list, but they're usually smaller characters. I would have been really torn about not including the Dax symbiote. I would have seriously considered putting Q on there. Character who I think is largely
shaking up my list.
Yeah. So Q would have definitely shaken up my list, because I know you said you haven't watched Picard season 2 yet, Bibbs.
Yeah, but I've heard a little bit about what's happening. Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to last week, or not this past week, but the weekend before, Fan Expo Cleveland was in town, and John Delancey was there. Nice. And I got to hear him talk about his thoughts on Q.
Nice.
And
That's cool.
he's like, and he talked about he's like, has the season finale aired yet? And everyone's like, no. He's like, I could spoil it for you, but it would ruin it. I kept that note in my head, and when I watched the finale this past week, I was shedding tears, because I'm like,
nice,
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real fast, I'm going to go through a couple others. There's a character who it's probably just personal preference, but they're one of my favorite characters, Luoxana Troy. I think does not
She's
get enough love.
She's a lover or hater type of character.
I love her so much. Everything she does is brilliant. Garrick would have been a
Garrick would also
Garrick
would have also shooken up my list.
But
there's so many Quark is there.
I like Quark, but there's also things I don't like about Quark. And here's what it boils down to: the two characters.
Quark is a sexist.
Yes, he is.
And he learned some valuable lessons, kind of, but it's also not cool. But for me, the two characters, they're one-off characters. They're only in one episode each. But I honestly think if they had been available to me, I would have wanted them in the top 6. One, Edith Keeler.
Okay.
One of the great tragedies in all of Star Trek, murdered by a lack of imagination. Oh, Edith Keeler has to die so we can save the future. We could take her to the future with us. We've done that a lot. We did that in Star Trek 4, just in case we needed someone to do a little bit more than us about whales. But we can't do it with Edith Keeler. Edith Keeler has to die. Fuck you, you sexist show. And then, but regardless, tragic character. But my number one character, and this is the character who, for me, would have been in my top 2 at least. Tuvix.
Boo on Tuvix. No. Murder
Tuvix.
Tuvix. Tuvix must die. He's an abomination.
But regardless, that's a conversation we have. That's a conversation. That's a complex ethical conversation we have. And that I think is interesting about Star Trek.
Real quick.
I like it as an ethical exercise, but Tuvix is an abomination. That's the only answer.
We'll bring back Neelix, I suppose. I didn't realize we loved Neelix so much.
Real quick, if you want an answer besides Sisko, it is Captain Pike, whether it's what we get in the original series, what you are going to get in Strange New Worlds, or what we got from Bruce Greenwood in the J.J. Abrams series. Captain Pike is one of the most undervalued characters, in my opinion, and I can't.
I'm very excited for him in Strange New Worlds, and I'm super jealous that you've seen 5 episodes, and I want to know how that happened.
I'm really excited to see this. I'm really excited to see this.
I don't write
critic
stuff, so
I haven't seen Anson Mount's version of Pike yet. I'm way behind on the new stuff. But there's one thing about old school Pike, original Pike, which really sullied me on the character. And it's from the original pilot. I can't remember if they actually show it in Menagerie or not. Which is when he's talking about retiring. He says, I'm thinking about retiring from Starfleet and going into the Orion slave trade. And I'm like, what? We're just sort of fine with that? What the hell are we? You're calling Kirk a colonizer? Holy shit. Right. Oh my God. Like, so that one, I'm hoping that's no longer canon, but because that really.
I think they've
I don't think you're gonna hear
that. They've retconned that, but they have
Okay.
addressed the fact that he did want to retire from.
Okay.
Well,
hopefully he's not did something,
but not about going into the Orion
virulently immoral. Okay.
I honestly think you will adore Anson Mounts Pike because he after Discovery season 2, I wanted the show Strange New Worlds, and they announced it a couple months later. But his performance, fantastic,
nice. With that, because if I'll let it go, we'll be on for another 30 minutes, and we do have to be on the show. But I do appreciate it. But last thing, before we get on, we do have to figure out who moves on in this tournament to face the 2 Star Wars characters for the fan vote. Looking at the poll, Spock also did come in at number 1. Kirk came in at number 2 and Picard came in at number 3. As much as we don't like this poll, that's what the poll came out with anyway. So at least they agreed on Spock. But the way this works is
Spock and Kirk going to his ass beat.
out of the 6 panelists and the fan vote, if they get a first place vote, it's 5 points. Second place vote, it's 3 points, and a third place vote, it is 1. So with that, the top 2 will be moving on. Just going to pull this down right here because we all know Spock is moving. That's happening.
Yeah.
29 points. The man murdered. Worse than Hermione did. Hermione killed last week. Spock did it even more.
Hermione's the smartest person in Harry Potter. Of course she was number 1.
Yes, she's amazing. Next is Picard. Picard came out with 8 points. Got a lot of those thirds, and I'm carrying them on my back. Lee gave Scotty a 3. Got him 1 second place vote. Got him 3 points.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes,
I can't
remember.
Scotty
is the smartest man in Starfleet. Sorry,
somebody did keep bones. I can't remember who it was.
James
on blast now.
What?
Yeah, we're gonna put James on blast, please.
Almost stayed was me, but I wanted to switch it up. Remember?
Okay.
Oh, it was Matt. That's right. I'm sorry, James.
I wanted to switch
James, we apologize.
James,
I'm leaving right now.
Matt,
I'm not even staying for this.
Matt, you forgot that Bones was a racist.
Yes.
No, because I strictly, once again, I thought about the Carl Urban Bones.
Carl Urban.
Yeah, I get it.
So Kirk just beating out Picard with the 1 first, 1 second, and 1 third. So going along with Spock, it is between Kirk and Data. And moving on
is Data.
Better be Data.
That is
better
Data.
be.
Yes. Beating them out is Data. So our winners for this one. Data and Spock will be moving on. I should have put the graphic together for round 2, but I'll do it later. So for our first round 2 matchup, we will have Data and Spock going up against Obi-Wan and Darth Vader.
Well, that's going to be easy then. What Star Wars can't compete with that? We're done, right?
What week is that tournament premiering? Is it
the worst Jedi teacher in history versus the worst Jedi student in history?
Time out,
lovely,
man.
Time out. Any of you want to come back for that episode?
I'm coming back for that episode.
I will come back
to figure out, make sure the biases don't come into play. But
look,
that is going to be.
I got Vader's TIE fighter on my arm. I come back.
Wow. Okay.
But as always, I do want to thank y'all for coming on. But as always, before we get out of here, I do have to give my riddle for next week's episode of One Gotta Stays, One Geek Tournament. And next episode, we're gonna be about that action. That's gonna be a day that you will always remember as a day that you almost caught easy choices. Okay, no, that's a lie. That's a lie. These choices are always impossible. But we find a way, whether or not we choose poorly or we push through the years and the mileage that these choices put on us. We're going to keep it moving as you wish. But this list, I'm telling you, the choices are going to be shaken and stirred in so many different ways that we are going to have to repeat the names over and over and over again to remind ourselves that these choices aren't going to kill us. Or maybe they will. With that, if you think you know what the list is for next week, put it in the comment section below. Let us know what you thought about this one. I would like to thank this very, very just tremendous panel again for Matt, for James, Bibbs, Clee, and PJ at home. Feel better, buddy. We will see you next time.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.